What? Yeah, you tell him. I think he should be. Yeah, there's a place here. The Parsha, as we always speak about the Parsha, which is Parsha's Bamidbar, surely, you learned already the first 2 or 3 days of Parsha's Bamidbar, so you know that it deals mainly about counting the Eden. This counting of Eden seems to be of such great significance and importance that the Torah does not only say that the Eden were counted, but it goes through on a detailed basis. First all the Shvatim, and then the counting of the Levim, and so forth, as you're going to see, the Levim, the B'chiras. And then later on, in Pashas Pinchas, Eden were counted again. Again, it goes through all the details. Obviously, the union of counting is a very important union and has a great message for us, for each one of us. A message that hopefully can give us a certain perspective. The fact is that the whole Chumash Bamidbar also has a secondary name, like you know that Vayikra has a secondary name, Teras Kehanim. Dvorim has a secondary name, Mishnah Torah. Bereshis is called Sefer HaYoshor. Bamidbar is called Sefer HaPkudim.
Why is it called Sefer HaYoshor?
HaYoshor it's called because it talks about the Yeshorim, the always.
Ah, okay.
It's called Chumash HaPkudim, even though there are so many different things in in the Chumash. It's called Chumash HaPkudim because of the counting that's related there.
What about Shemais? There's another name too?
Shemais is not known as a secondary name. It's essentially Chumash HaGeula, but it's not known as by that name. Along with that, there is on the calendar, that our calendar was set up some 2,000 years ago. And one of the principles of our calendar is that the Parsha Bamidbar should always be read publicly before Shavuoss. The principle over there is not necessarily immediately before Shavuos. Sometimes Parshas Nosei also comes in the middle, the next Parsha. Sometimes not. But it's never before Shavuos, and never after Shavuos. Again, that tells us that the union of counting has a very close relationship with Matan Torah. In preparation for Matan Torah, we also have the counting of Sfira, which we discussed last week. Some points about counting of Sfira. In general, in counting, there are two principles involved. Number one, each individual has his own count. We spoke about Sphira, if you would recall, about counting the Sphira. We do not count first, second, and third day, which would mean that we're referring to the days only in their sequence, how they relate to one another. But we count day 1, day 2, day 3, each day as an individual, as a separate entity. So on the one hand, we count each day as a separate entity. But then we also say that this is day 2, day 3. We don't count day 1, day 1, day 1. Say day 2, day 3. In other words, there is the overall relationship and there's the individual day. The same thing in counting Yid. Every Yid has a count. And in this, it's pointed out that every Yid has a count, which implies that all Yid, every individual Yid, on this level, they're all equal. It could be the greatest scholar or the simplest amongst the Yidden. They all have, each one has one count. It's counted as one. There's no difference between one and the other, which we will discuss in a minute. But then on the other hand, you can't count unless there is a group. Each one is an individual, but the group is also recognized as that encompasses, that includes and incorporates all of these individuals. So counting represents two things. Represents the individual and represents his place and contribution to the group. Contribution, but he adds. Incorporate, that includes, that takes in together. I'm glad you ask. And the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Loi habayshon lomit, that you cannot learn if you allow your timidity and your embarrassment to prevent you from asking a question. For learning, you have to remove all embarrassment and you have to ask every question that you have. Another important thing which we will discuss hopefully today is that the counting of the Yidden is described in the Torah as counting males from 20 years and on. And why are they selected? Because Kol Yetzei Tzova. You learn that Kol Yetzei Tzova because they can go out and fight wars. They can wage wars. They can be in the army. They can join Hashem's army. The Jewish people, when they left Mitzrayim, they are referred to in the Torah as Tzivos Hashem, as Hashem's armies. We discussed last week, and I want to include that because I already explained that principle, that in Sfiras HaOmer, we count each day individually. And by counting each day, we say that this cleanses and purifies our soul. That's what we say. Cleanses and purifies our souls. How does counting accomplish cleansing or purifying our souls? So simply put, when a person comes to a new day, and he does not say, oh, this day is like yesterday. It's just there naturally. There was a day yesterday, and now there's a natural development that now there's another day. There's another day. It's kind of a natural cycle. This natural view hides and conceals the truth that each day is a new godly creation. This is, in fact, you know that the word teva, nature, in Lashon Kodesh, is called teva. Teva, the word teva, is related to the word, like we say in Ozyosha, tubu b'yamsuf, tubu, to be sunk. The idea of teva is that everything sinks into a natural, sinks. Utanulsa.
Yeah.
It's okay. Everything sinks into a process. And the reason, the recognition of the individual entity, of the specific entity, everything sinks together. And it hides the most important point, the most important phenomenon of all existence, that we have to recognize the novelty of existence all the time. Novelty, the newness, right. And thus we say, by counting each day, and counting each day as a new day, day 2, not day 2nd. Say day 2 means we didn't expect this day to be here. If it's there, oh, that's a new thing. Day 3. And that way, we have both. We have a novelty, a new thing. We recognize again that Hashem creates the world afresh, which means it doesn't allow us to sink into the teva, into the darkness of nature. At the same time, we are accumulating. Accumulating means we're adding on. Each time that we have to recognize this truth again, we are breaking through this darkness again. And each time we're breaking through this darkness, we are eliminating it little by little. And as it's explained regarding Sfiras HaOmer, is that we count 49 days, which is 7 weeks, 7 times 7, corresponding, as you know from the Sfira, corresponding to the 7 midos. Each day is another midah, a conjugation of a midah, chesed shebechesed, chesed shebegvura, and so forth, or gvura shebechesed. That way, we are accumulating and slowly breaking through each one of these midas, each one of these natural tendencies. Midas are natural tendencies. We're breaking through these natural tendencies, and instead of looking at the world from a natural perspective, we see the world as a godly creation. And this brings us to Kabbalah's HaTorah. This is what prepares us for Kabbalah's HaTorah, because Kabbalah's HaTorah means that we are completely free from worldliness. We're completely free from the rules of the world, and we accept rules for our lives from God Himself. Instead of being ruled by natural phenomenon, a natural experience, we get our rules and our daily routines, our schedules, and our way of life from above, from God Himself. To prepare for that, we have to climb out of nature. And this is how it happens, by counting these 49 days and cleansing ourselves from dissociating from being in the nature of all these 7 midas, 7 attributes, 7 natural tendencies. The similar inyan is in the counting of Yid, when the Jewish people were counted in the desert. The principle of this count is that it has to be recognized that each individual Yid has a place in God's army, has a place in God's world, as an individual. He doesn't get lost in the shuffle. Each one has his own place and his own contribution. If we would reflect on what this means, sometimes it sounds good, but what does this mean in terms of a person's mindset, in terms of how a person relates to his own life? The first thing that comes to a person when he approaches to do something of significance, something of importance, besides that he has the attacks, oh, I'm lazy, I don't feel like, and so forth, there's something which comes before that. What does this have to do with me? Who am I to be concerned about this? I'm just a little insignificant entity. That is a, so to speak, an attack on the individual, on the human being that occurs all the time. And this attack clearly comes from nature, from a worldly perspective. If we see a human being, a person, from a natural perspective, hey, he's just living. You know how he's living? He's eating and sleeping. That's how he's alive. So then, indeed, what's his significance? But if we recognize that every individual Yid has a neshama, and this neshama is, as the Alter Rebbe explains, and you all learned, is a godly neshama. He is a little piece of God. This neshama is as true as God Himself. And this neshama is alive and thrives all by itself. It doesn't need any prodding. It doesn't need anything to push it. It has a life that is drawn to the truth all on its own. As we know, this is important to understand. There could be a person who is in a perfectly comfortable circumstance. He's got a job, or he's got a business circumstance, situation, matzav. He's got everything he needs. From a worldly perspective, he should be 100% satisfied. And yet, something is bothering him. Something is missing. This something that's missing is clearly not because of anything that he recognizes in the world. This is something which is entirely individual. This is entirely internal himself. And no matter what he has and what experience he has, this thing goes on gnawing at him and bothering him. Because every person, every Yid, is a standalone, as a separate individual creation. And if you recognize this, which is the principle of counting, that we count every individual separately, when we recognize this, then we have the strength to stand up and do what we need to do regardless of what the world says about us. Because we transcend, we go beyond and more powerful than anything in natural world. This is the meaning that this count of Eden is a count that is related to them being in Hashem's army. What is the meaning of Hashem's army? What does Hashem need an army for? The army is for the purpose of conquering the world, and as it may, deliver the world to Hashem. Bring back. In other,
delivering the world?
Mm-hmm. Bring it back to him. In other words, this counting puts us in a completely different position and orientation. What orientation means? Self-evaluation regarding ourselves in completely different viewpoint. We can regard ourselves the way it is, so to speak, in the natural world. How successful am I? What gifts do I have? How smart am I? And how talented am I? These are all things that are measured that are measurements, and very superficial and, so to speak, in a worldly measurement. What can I accomplish on the worldly level? The real accomplishment of every individual Yid is that he stands and declares himself as being a Yid. This is the count. He declares himself as being a Yid. He declares himself. He accepts this mission that he lives at the level of the recognition of who he is by virtue of what Hashem made him, not what his environment and what the natural world says about him. This is true regarding absolutely every individual person. No one should allow himself to be belittled and said, like the expression is, who am I and what am I? Because the question is not what you think, the question is not what your neighbor thinks, the question is what Hashem thinks. Hashem has imbued in each one of us a neshama, imbued, put in. This neshama, we're learning Chassidus and we're touching upon it a little bit. Like I mentioned before, this neshama lives independently of everything else that's around it. just to point out, which also we discussed, we mentioned in the past. You have, imagine an elderly person, very elderly, very weak, does not have strength to cross the street. To cross the street is a big accomplishment. The hope that sometimes I'm going to be the head of IBM, the head of CBS, doesn't exist. He doesn't have that kind of ambitions. Doesn't have any kind of ambitions. So you watch sometimes, you have an elderly lady pushing her little cart across the street, and it takes her X number of minutes to cross the street, and she is overjoyed when she makes it over there. Finally, she drudges along and comes to her little grocery store, picks up a bottle of milk, puts it into her cart, and pushes it back, and all this whole cart, and this whole operation can take her a half hour, sometimes an hour, and she feels fully accomplished because she did something for herself, and something is pushing this person, because we have to understand the life that's within us is true. As young people, we don't realize it, because as young people we are involved in ambition and in thinking about the future, what I'm going to be, how I'm going to accomplish. But the truth is that we have to pay attention to our number. I am one. Who am I? What am I? As one, as a perfect individual, I have a real life to live and a real mission for the Maker, independent of anything else. That way, one can act and live a Jewish life under all circumstances. It doesn't have to be, Baruch Hashem, be in the yeshiva environment. Whatever you throw him, whatever you put him, he is that same individual. He doesn't get lost. He doesn't get lost in his environment because he knows who he is. This is one of the things that the Rebbe said about Tomchet Mimim. You know that the yeshiva that you're learning it, all the Babish yeshivas are called Tomchet Mimim. Tomchet Mimim was a yeshiva that was established by the Rebbe Rashab in Lubavitch. And the union of Tomchet Mimim is, and the Talmidim in Tomchet Mimim are called Tmimim, Atomim. The power of the Tomim is that you can take one, put him in the middle of a desert, of a spiritual desert, and instead of him getting lost, he makes the whole desert bloom.
Spiritual special forces.
He special forces beyond enemy lines. You throw him there like through a paratrooper, and he goes and he transforms the entire environment. This happened hundreds of times. And this is what all of us here are. And the Pasha of the week that says you have to be counted as an individual, that is symbolic of this, and that represents this whole thing. Symbol. That represents this whole thing. More specifically, in the counting of Eden, the Rebbe points out that actually, prior to this counting here, Yidden were counted 3 times before that. As it's mentioned in the Torah, when they came out of Mitzrayim, they were counted. There were 600,000. It says 600,000. How do we know that? Because there was a count. And when they left Mitzrayim. Before the building of the Mishkan, they were counted for the Adanim and so forth. And now, before Matan Torah, they were counted again. Or after the Mishkan was erected. That's in Iyot, that one. We read it before Matan Torah, but the count was after Matan Torah, after the Mishkan was put up.
The count in this week's parsha though is before Matan Torah.
The count itself was before Matan Torah. No, it was after Matan Torah. The count itself was after Matan Torah.
In this week's parsha, the count that we're talking about, chronologically speaking, is after Matan
Torah. After Matan Torah.
Doesn't it say when they first came to the mountain?
This count was the second year. It was in the second month, but also in the second year. Matan Torah was in the first year. It was in the 3rd month of the first year when they came out of Mitzrayim. And this count was in the 2nd month of the 2nd year. Rosh Chodesh Iyar of the 2nd year. Okay?
Yeah, I thought I remember it starting off by saying that the Yidden came to Midbar Sinai.
Yeah.
Midbar Sinai. So
Right.
They came to the Midbar Sinai, so weren't they already there? If this taking place after Matan Torah, so then wouldn't they already be there? Why does it say that they came there?
It doesn't say in this parsha they came.
It doesn't say that.
No. No. It said that the Rebbe spoke to Moshe in Midbar Sinai, but no. They came there a year earlier. So briefly, Rebbe explains that the union of counting, as we pointed out, counting refers to and relates to the neshama of a Yid. That's why he gets counted. And in that there are 3 levels. 3 levels how this is recognized. The first day is when they came out of Mitzrayim. When Yidden came out of Mitzrayim, they were dragged out of Mitzrayim essentially. They were not at all prepared for it, but because that they had this neshama, they were able to follow, but they did not yet fully understand what they're following, what they're doing. They're able to follow Moshe Rabbeinu. Afterwards, when it came after the period that they spent the time, they received the Torah and so forth, and then they put up the Mishkan, and they went through the entire process of accepting the Torah and building a Mishkan. Then their recognition of the union of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the recognition of their neshama, came more revealed, and they were able to really relate to it even intellectually. You understand it? Then came the 3rd counting. The 3rd counting is what's related in our parsha. As I mentioned, that in our parsha it says that they were counted in the 2nd month. Achodesh Hasheni, the 2nd month. The 2nd month is the month of Iyar. The 1st month is the month of Nisan. The difference between Nisan and Iyar, the Rebbe explains, is that Nisan is a month of miracles, month of Nisan, and Iyar is is after the miracles. Here is not a month of miracles. It's a month of of a person's individual avoid. In individual avodah, it is necessary to understand that it is not enough to know what Hashem says, to know how the things are from a Torah perspective. It is necessary for a person to relate to it individually, him personally. In other words, we have to ultimately work all the inyonim of Torah, all the inyonim of emunah and recognition of godliness has to be worked through into our very essence, so that it is no longer something that is an add-on to us, something that's external. That there is the person and there is that which he knows, that which he learned. There has to be something that has been worked into his very own mitzvah, his very own fiber. This is when the neshama, I'll explain a little bit more later, but the terminology is, this is when the neshama permeates, goes through the entire person, and it changes his entire orientation. Instead of thinking of himself, thinking of the world, from a worldly perspective, he sees the world as a godly thing. But the neshama has broken through and illuminated the whole world and his whole mitzvahs. Matan Torah, the Rebbe explains. I'll afterwards bring it back to us. I just want to tell you briefly the point of the Sikha. Matan Torah, the Rebbe says, had the special thing that happened in Matan Torah is that from then on, from Matan Torah on, we have been given the power to actually change the world itself, change the gashmis, the physical fabric of the world. What this means is as follows. Before Matan Torah, if a person would do a mitzvah using an object, using some physical object, so the deed is a good deed, but the physical object would remain what it was before, would not become a holy object. After Matan Torah, when we take hide, we take skin of an animal, we take leather, we make tefillin out of it, the leather itself becomes kodesh. It transforms the actual fabric itself. So that when the Yidden built, let's say for instance, they built the Mishkan in the desert, they took wood, they took copper, they took gold, and they built it into the Mishkan. All of those objects, the material itself became holy. Not only it was used for a holy purpose, it became holy, it was transformed. This is the special power that was given to Yidden at Matan Torah. How was this given to them? How did this take place? And the explanation is that in order to change, to transform, to affect the actual physical entity, the holiness, the godliness, the godly power has to become part of the physical entity. And this is what is indicated in this last counting, that at this point, the Yid, the Jew, every individual Yid acquired, he had his holiness, his neshama permeate not only his intellect, but his very essence, his whole mitzias, his whole individuality. And therefore, this is how the godly holiness was brought into the world. From then on, whatever he does is automatically permeated even in the physical world. Yes?
Yid himself was different from Matan Torah?
Yeah.
Is there a possibility to explain the difference?
In general,
Yeah, interesting.
in general, it means that before Matan Torah, all inyonim, all aspects that one would recognize of Torah and mitzvahs, of goodness and holiness, would all be on the intellectual level, not on the personal level. In other words, he understands that this is the right thing, but that this is him, and that the world itself has been changed, that now it's no longer a physical, no longer a natural world. That hasn't happened. I understand that this is how it is, but that's not the way the world itself is. And this is what happens through our Torah mitzvahs, throughout the years, that when doing Torah mitzvahs, we are actually transforming and changing the very fabric of the world. Until this ultimately brings to the Geula, where the whole world and everything, just the very nature itself, recognizes that it's not natural. Having said all that, this is from the Sikha. I want to discuss it a little bit on the simple, on our personal understanding. When you open up a Shulchan Aruch, in the Shulchan Aruch it says, by common illustration, you wake up in the morning, you have to say Moedei Ani. And after Moedei Ani, you have to wash Negel Wasser. There are two ways that one can relate to it. One is ready to do it. It's on the Shulchan Aruch, I'm ready to do it. But there are two ways how one can relate to it. One is, I don't know what this is all about. This is a strange thing to me. I'm told that this is what I'm supposed to do, so I go ahead and do it. I believe the people who wrote the Shulchan Aruch knew what they were saying, knew what they were telling me, and they probably know better than I what I'm supposed to do. But essentially, this is something which I'm doing because I'm told, because they knew, not me. This is like one is taking a medicine that a doctor prescribes. He has no understanding of this medicine. He hates to take it. It doesn't taste good. But what can he do? The doctor said he should take the medicine. And he trusts the doctor. But then there is a different perspective completely. When one eats a meal, a good and hefty meal, it's also healthy, and the doctor says it's a good meal. But he understands, he can relate to it. It tastes good. He experiences it. He can readily understand why a meal, it makes him feel good, why a meal would make him healthy. The union of Torah mitzvahs, the union of saying Moedei Ani, and washing Negel Wasser in the morning, and getting up, and getting dressed in the proper way, the proper tznius, and everything else that follows throughout the day, this is like a meal. This is like a personal, a completely personal thing for a Yid. We say, for instance, that a Yid has to, you have to conduct ourselves with tznius all the time. When you get dressed, you have to be with tznius. I'm sure you learn the basic halachas to the extent possible. This tznius, as it sounds in Shulchan Aruch, is because that we are always in the presence of Hashem. This union that we are always in the presence of Hashem goes hand in hand, goes together in recognizing that I am an individual, that Hashem made me. And therefore I have to be in the presence of Hashem. If I think of myself as just part of the world, part of nature, then in order to think that Hashem is present in my life is something which is so far and very distant. But in fact, ultimately, we recognize and we relate to Hashem's presence in our lives as a matter of fact. It's a matter of reality. Because we recognize who we are. We are counted. We have an neshama. The whole reason why I'm here and the whole reason why I'm doing everything is because I was counted. And being counted means that Hashem is there with me. And therefore, I'm always in His presence and I act accordingly. Not because only because the Shulchan Aruch says so, but because that's the reality. This is the meaning the Rebbe explains of the third count, of the count that we do before Matan Torah, that we read before Matan Torah. This is what prepares us for Matan Torah. This is what gives us the strength to afterwards go through a day of doing mitzvahs, and every mitzvah is something that we relate to. That's something that is a real powerful act on our part. It's not just doing our duty. Putting on tefillin is a real act. It's not just fulfilling our duties. Tefillin, tzitzis, davening, learning, making a bracha. It's a real part of our lives. Each one of these things, everything that we do, attests. And attest means it proves, it shows that we are what the term is for real. We are real people. And therefore we have a real presence and a real life to live.
Should you do mitzvahs even if you don't feel?
I'm sorry?
Should you do mitzvahs even if you don't have a feeling for
Yes, you can. What I'm saying is that when we reflect on this principle of being counted, this helps us to ultimately be able to relate to mitzvahs in a real way. It's true that you can, but we have to also utilize, we have to use the strength and the koiches that Hashem gave us, that the Torah provides us with. The Torah teaches us and tells us that each one of us has been counted. And we should not minimize it. We should not discount ourselves. The terminology is the same, either be counted or discount. We shouldn't discount ourselves. We shouldn't lower ourselves. A Yid is not allowed to embarrass himself because he is Hashem's presence in the world. He has to be an onov. He shouldn't be a balgaiva, but that has nothing to do with lowering himself and losing sense of the importance and the significance of his life. The union of anivas and not to be a balgaiva is only. The Alter Rebbe explains why shouldn't we be a balgaiva? Look, I learned and I know why shouldn't I be a balgaiva. The answer is because I'm learning because Hashem gave me the opportunity and gave me the koiches to learn. Therefore, it's not of my doing. It's Hashem's gift to me. But what I'm doing is really very important. That cannot be minimized. That cannot be overstated. It's the greatest thing. That has to be recognized. For that, we have to be very proud and be balgaiva in that respect, that we have this opportunity. There was a sikha one time from Rebbe. This is going back many, many, many years. I don't remember, I can tell you it was either in the late 50s, early 60s. If that means the same thing to you. There was a contest. There was a general contest on Shakespeare. You heard what Shakespeare? Shakespeare was a British, an English writer, and he's considered a very literary writer and so forth. There was a contest in Shakespeare in the colleges, and a Jewish college, and this is the YU, a Jewish college, did very well on that contest. Some of the students won great prizes in this, and this this phenomenon that they won these prizes was written up in all the papers, and everybody was walking around proudly. Look what the Jewish kids are able to do. And then the Rebbe, I was there present at this Fabrengen. The Rebbe was in the Silent Fabrengen, and he started talking about this. They're making such a fuss of a Yiddish Bocher because he was successful in the contest on Shakespeare. They're proud of the fact that he became an expert on the writings of Shikir and Goy. That's what the Rebbe says. A young kid, a yingel, the Rebbe says, a yingel means a boy, who learns a Blat Gemara is infinitely superior to all that. And no fuss is being made about that. So we are absolutely allowed to be proud of the fact that we learn Blat Gemara. You got it? The fact that we say we should not be balagaiva doesn't have anything to do with it. To learn about Gemara and to understand it is a real challenge, much more of a challenge than studying Shakespeare. Even though no fusses are being made about it. And most important is that it engages our real intellect, our real seichel, and it entices our real neshamas. It is a real thing and brings real life into the world. So now that we are coming to Matan Torah, I don't know if next week probably we won't meet. We are approaching Matan Torah. This is the time to prepare for Matan Torah. Each one of us, the first principle of preparing for Matan Torah is to recognize that we were counted. Each one of us has our own neshamas, our own shlichus from the Rebbe, directly to Hashem. We have to respect our own neshamas, in effect, and understand what it is who we are. When Hashem gave us the Torah, the first words in the Torah first words of Matan Torah is, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. Hashem Elokecha means your God on the singular form, not your God in the plural, not the God of all the Eden, every individual Eden. But Matan Torah, Hashem spoke to every individual Eden. Makes no difference whether there's 600,000 or there's 6 million, makes no difference. Hashem speaks to every individual Eden. And he gives each individual the koyach to carry out his mission. That's the primary thing. The Rebbe should help you, should help us all, that we should approach Matan Torah with full glory, full strength. We should remember all of the things that we mentioned, that Hashem speaks to every individual. Never should we allow ourselves to be minimized, to be made small of, without becoming Balagavit. This is two different things completely. And every time we take out the tefillin to put on, we should remember, we should be proud of it. We should know this is a great thing. Every time we wash negel also, we should be proud. This is not just following routine. This is the real thing. This way, Hashem's help, we receive the Torah. And the Rebbe says, "B'simcha, b'pnimius," with joy and internally, and will give us strength to carry out our mission. And altogether, it will bring us a bracha, and will bring us happiness, and on all counts, spiritually and physically. And we should all be zeicher to Geulah Shleima soon.